Hi guys, and welcome to my review of the Honor 7. This device has been on the market for quite a while now, and for a long time I thought this must be one of the best phones at around 300 euros, because I reviewed the Huawei Mate S, which has quite similar internals, and I absolutely love that one. So if this is the great phone that I thought it would be, we'll find out in my full review, and as of just recently I will start off with the overview now, then go into the details and end the review with my conclusion. So in terms of design and build quality, I really like it because it feels very substantial, very sturdy in the hand. My review unit already had quite a few drops and it doesn't look that great anymore, but we will see that later in the detailed part. But just in terms of design and build, it just feels amazing and it looks really great, so job done well here. In terms of the display, I have to say this is a really nice 1080p display. Maybe not quite as great as it was on the P8, but they do a great job because Huawei really knows to calibrate their displays really well and choose really good ones as well. In terms of sound, maybe not quite that happy because it could be a little bit louder and it could be a little bit richer in terms of sound, and the placement of the speaker is a little bit unfortunate. I would wish for it to be on the other side. In terms of performance, actually not that much to complain, but I expected a little bit more since I've used the Huawei Mate S, and that one just felt a little bit lighter, a little bit more lag free. I already got the Marshmallow update, it didn't really change anything, and I even did a factory reset, but the performance is still, I would say, just slightly above average, somewhere closer to mid-range premium phones, but it can't compete with phones like the Nexus 5X. In terms of battery life, no complaints here at all. The 3000 mAh battery does a great job. I got easily solid 4.5 hours throughout the whole testing period. This was with mixed use, which for me, as of lately, is a little bit harder. On Wi-Fi, I would expect at least 1 hour more, so definitely a very well battery life after all. In terms of the software, you can check my software review because I still like the EMUI, especially with the Marshmallow update. Now a few things that I didn't like so much got improved, and now overall it looks way better. The design, of course, is still not everyone's first choice, but in overall I still think it does a really good job. The camera, when it comes to the selfie game, I think it adds a little bit too much color, just tries to make things look better than they are. In low light, they are quite okay, maybe not super sharp, but definitely not that noisy, so quite okay, still a little bit on the blurry side. The outdoor shots are really great details and all that. It tends to overexpose a little bit, but it's the video qualities that I'm just not that happy with, because no autofocus and everything seems like blurry and oversharpened at the same time. So this would be it. If you want to jump to the conclusion, you can do just that. Other than that, we will go into the detailed part and take a look at the design and build quality. As we can already see here, we have aluminum build. So let's compare it just real quick with the S7. As you can see, 5.2 incher against them 5.1 incher. It is noticeably taller and is actually more than I thought wider. In terms of thickness, there's not a huge difference, but for a 5.2 incher, this still does a great job because it is a little bit thicker than the P8 was, but of course it also has a bigger battery with 3000 milliamps, so I'm fine with that because it still feels quite okay. It feels a little bit more hefty, a little bit more bulky, but therefore it also feels quite solid. It does creak a little bit though, and as you can maybe see here, my device already had a few nicks and dents here, the scratch, and it doesn't look that great anymore. The beveled edges actually look still quite good, something I didn't expect. I would think they would have looked way more scratched up, but in terms of this, they don't grab, but it does creak a little bit on bending. You won't really do this too much, but on gaming, I actually noticed that this corner does creak a little bit when I played a little bit too hard, but still in terms of build quality really nice. Here we have the fingerprint reader that works really great because as you can see it opens up really fast. No complaints at all. I still think Huawei, or in this case Honor here, does one of the best fingerprint reader overall. Here we have the flash, here we have the camera, on top we have the microphone, headphone jack, and this would be maybe an IR blaster, nice. And here we have the SIM card and SD card tray, along with the smart key. I will get into that later in the software part. On the bottom we have micro USB and 2 speaker grills, but only this one is the speaker. Usually they put them on the right side, which I would have preferred because using it like this, I actually blocked it more often, but I will go to that later in the sound part. Therefore the buttons are absolutely great placed. I still think this is pretty much the perfect position, same as it is, quite similar as we can see here in terms of the S7, so absolutely great done. The button maybe is very small, but it's really easy to find it. The same goes for the volume rocker, but actually mine is broken because my upper or my volume down key doesn't do anything. We have to press really hard so it actually does anything. The volume up though works, so I guess a few drops too much. But As of overall, I think it is a really great build device in terms of design and build quality. I really like it a lot. For around $300, this is actually more than you should expect. Now, let's get into the display. 5.2-inch 1080p IPS display, and I really don't get quite how Huawei achieves these displays, because the sharpness is absolutely great. It is super clear, something I absolutely like. The white point is pretty much perfect, and especially since we have color temperature control, you can set it just the way you want it. So great here. Black's quite deep, absolutely nice. No light bleed at all, so really good job here. The contrast is really good. Colors are quite vibrant, quite vivid, and actually very natural. If you're coming from an AMOLED device, they could seem a little bit more washed out or a little bit dull, but they actually aren't, because they are really nice. And if someone knows to calibrate a display properly, then it's definitely Huawei or Honor in this case. So absolutely great job. Now let's check the sound here, because I would say I'm halfway okay with it. So you can already see, if I play games, you should definitely leave a little bit space, so not press against it. So in games it's actually quite okay, and in landscape as well, but I noticed that at least if I use it in portrait, I blocked it, which is maybe not the biggest issue, because usually I use it in landscape if I do some audio stuff and so on. So that it's quite okay, but in portrait, just keep that in mind. The maximum volume is a little bit of an odd thing, because in closed rooms or in my bedroom, in my living room and all that, the sound sounds absolutely fine, is loud enough, halfway rich, I would say, a little bit of bass, quite good mids and clear highs. But I noticed, for example, at my workplace where it is a little bit louder, the maximum volume just couldn't keep up, and then you noticed way more, then it just isn't that loud. So if you're mostly in closed rooms that aren't too loud, it is totally fine. Absolutely no problems, but in wider, more open areas, for some reason it didn't quite convince me that much. Now, about the performance. Let's check that one, and I'm really happy what I see so far here, because if you are in the browser, as you can see, everything is super nicely smooth. In the browser, no complaints here at all. Rendering times are nice, and it's, if not rendering at it already, absolutely fine. And even the older browser engine works absolutely fine, no complaints here at all. But I noticed, for example, in some apps like Phoenix or so, there is a little bit of occasional lag, as you can see here. It just doesn't perform always perfectly smooth. So it is okay, and it definitely performs more than well enough. But if you compare this, for example, with a Nexus 5X, then there's no comparison. The Nexus 5X would blow it away, because, sorry, it loads everything quite okay. It's definitely not as snappy and not as fast as some other devices on the market, and this could be now just a thing of the loading times. But it's definitely a solid performer, definitely a little bit above average. But as you can see here, there is some occasional lag. The app needs to cache a little bit, and I noticed the longer you use an app, the better it gets. But if you just jump into the apps, and you will also notice that the multitasking works, I would say halfway decent. It still reloads quite a few times, but it's definitely not the end of the world. So I'm okay with the performance. I would have wished for a little bit more, because from the Mate S I expected a little bit more. I didn't see the quite frequent lag so much there, because if it's smooth, it's really super smooth. But the Mate S didn't have this odd, quite frequent, but not really hard lag. So just keep that in mind. In terms of gaming performance, I was actually really pleased, because I already liked it on the Huawei Mate S. A few people still think the GPU isn't the fastest or strongest one, but I had no complaints. Everything was smooth. All the games that I played were nice. It does heat up, even in normal use, quite noticeably, especially on mobile data. I noticed the device getting quite warm at around 35, 36 degrees during gaming. It maybe gets a little bit hotter, but not really that much, and I didn't notice any throttling. But since it's an aluminum device, you will feel the heat just a little bit more. And it was on mobile data where it got not uncomfortably, but a little bit of annoyingly warm. So that is one thing to keep in mind. Now, when we talk about the battery, a full charge takes about 2 hours. Absolutely fine. I didn't actually expect a 3000 milliamp hour battery to charge that quick. And the battery life, as I already said, is super consistent. I got every time pretty much around 4.5 hours plus minus 5 minutes or so. This was with mixed use. And since I said it, recently I have a little bit of a harder drain at my workplace with mobile data, and I would expect it with Wi-Fi to get you at least 1 hour more, because I've noticed that for some reason the first 20% drain a little bit faster, and then it's super solid. So I still say it's definitely noticeably above average in terms of battery life, and no complaints here at all. This is easily on Galaxy S7 level, which I think is totally good enough. Now, if we talk about the software, I already did a dedicated software review for the Mate S, which now, thanks to Marshmallow, is pretty much the same, so you can check that. We have these quick shortcuts from the lock screen. We have now things like the way more better or way improved multitasking, because this one is way better than the card system we had before, and it works just nice because the last app is always in the middle, so this makes jumping between apps so much easier. We also now can finally rearrange the shortcuts and actually delete some of them, so you don't always have to see all of them, which is nice. And there are a few other improvements. There is still the one thing to consider, that is a little bit of annoying battery management. You can kind of disable it, but it still is a little bit more on the drastic side, because, for example, apps like Phoenix, even though they should sync in the back, just won't sync unless you turn on the device, and then it will get the chance to it. And apps, for example, like GSAM Battery Monitor, that should in the background monitor your battery life, even though it's a protected app, just didn't work at all. So keep that in mind. The battery management is still a little bit too much on the harsh side. Now, if we talk about the camera, selfie game first, if you see those, they look very, very pleasing and very, very sharp, but they also look a little bit unnatural, because I'm definitely not that saturated in my face and so on. My skin color doesn't look right, so it adds a little bit of a saturation, even though I have disabled all the beauty modes and so on. If we go inside though and have a little bit of lower light, it gets a little bit blurry, the autofocus gets a little bit slower, shutter times get a little bit slower, but I think the outcome is still quite okay from what I see from other devices as well. It's definitely not super sharp, and there is a little bit of noise, but it's not too blurry or too grainy, so all fine. Here, if you go outside, have better light, you will still notice that things tend to overexpose a little bit. But besides that, and if you maybe color correct that a little bit, you will get really pleasing shots, because actually quite sharp, almost a tendency to oversharpen in some case, or it just is that sharp. But the colors are really nice. Like I said, it tends to overexpose. Shutter focus and shutter times and focus times are quite good, not quite on a flagship level, but still totally fine. So I'm good with those results, but it's the video quality that I'm still just not happy on a Huawei device, and still the only device that I am happy with is the Huawei Mate S, the Mate 8, because it still looks blurry, it still looks oversharpened. At the same time, the exposure transition is a little bit more on the obvious side, and there is no autofocus. That is my main gripe here. So if you want to jump between macro shots and landscape shots, you will have to manually adjust it all the time. And yeah, the camera quality just isn't that great. So as I said, for pics, actually really nice, actually no problem, way above the normal average mid-ranger, but the video quality is quite disappointing still. Now, let's get to the conclusion then. Do I think it's the great $300 device? And I think like 1 year ago, or when it was released, it definitely was, because then the competition was a little bit weaker and the other great competitors now were just a little bit more expensive. And here, for example, I see the biggest competitor to be the currently in the price dropped Nexus 5X, that I think is overall maybe the better phone, because yes, in terms of design and build quality and the display, the Honor 7 wins definitely. In terms of battery life, also by at least solid 30 minutes more. But it's things where the performance, for example, here is way better on the Honor 5X, because it's overall just way smoother, snappier, and way more consistent. And also the battery, the camera, sorry for that, the camera is miles and miles better, because on the 5X we have a flagship camera where we have it slightly above average camera here. Where they are quite similar though is in terms of sound. I would even say maybe the Honor 7 has a little bit of a better, richer sound, and the battery life is quite similar, so they are kind of close to each other, but I still think, mostly for me especially personally, because of the better camera and the way more consistent, better performance, I would give the Nexus 5X with the custom ROM options and all that the slight favor. But if you prefer the more premium feel, the better display, maybe the little bit better sound, and just don't need the best performance in camera, then this is definitely a legit competitor, because for some people, the design and build quality, the feel in hand is just way more important. And here, especially also with the nicer display, the Honor 7 wins. Now, if you want to maybe have some other comparisons and want to know which one is better, just leave that in the comment, or if you have any questions, do just that. Other than that, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this. And all I have to say then is, I wish you a nice day. Until next time, bye.